The clinking of glasses echoed across the banquet hall, laughter rolling through the air like a wave. Round tables draped in ivory linens filled the space, the chandelier lights bouncing off polished wine glasses. It was supposed to be a celebration, our annual family reunion, but in reality, it felt more like a stage where reputations were paraded and pride was auctioned. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us where are you from, and from which city you're watching our videos. And after watching the whole video, don't forget to tell us, what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. Attention everyone, my mother's voice cut through the chatter. Her tone had that sharp edge I'd known my whole life, the one that carried the weight of judgment. I froze mid-bite, fork trembling in my hand. Mom stood at the head of the table, her crimson dress gleaming under the light. She raised her glass of champagne, her lips curling into that familiar, disdainful smile. "This year has been remarkable for our family," she began, her eyes scanning over my cousins, lawyers, doctors, entrepreneurs, all of them basking in her approval. "We have so much to celebrate. Success surrounds us, and it is proof of the strength of this family." The room hummed with agreement, the claps, the nods, the murmurs of pride. My stomach knotted. I knew what was coming. She couldn't resist. But her voice lingered like poison on the air, dragging attention toward me. "There are exceptions?" Every eye turned my way. My cheeks burned hot, my throat tightening. My cousin Scott chuckled under his breath, sipping his wine as if this was routine entertainment. Mom set her glass down with precision, her gaze stabbing into me. "Some of us," she said, the corners of her mouth twitching in mock pity, "have chosen no future. Some of us remain irrelevant." A silence dropped heavy over the room. My heart slammed in my chest, pounding against my ribs like it wanted out. She tilted her head, voice rising just enough to make sure no one missed a word. "She has no career, no contribution, nothing to her name. In fact," her lips pursed, cruel amusement flashing in her eyes. "If you wish to celebrate true accomplishments, I suggest you all ignore her." The words sliced me open. My fork clattered against the plate, the sound sharp in the silence. I felt their eyes on me. Pity, amusement, judgment. A mixture that twisted into a sickening knot in my stomach. I wanted to vanish. Lila, my sister, leaned back in her chair, smirking. "She's not wrong," she whispered loud enough for others to hear. "Some people are just background noise." Laughter rippled, cruel and unrestrained. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay composed. My hands balled into fists under the table. The humiliation was crushing, a heat crawling up my neck, burning through every nerve. I could have screamed. I could have lashed out. But I sat still, silent, my face a mask though my insides shook. Across the table, my cousin Rachel whispered, "Poor thing," to her husband, though the smirk on her face betrayed her words. My mother raised her glass once again, sealing my humiliation with a toast. "To success," she said, her eyes lingering on everyone but me. The clinking returned, louder than before. I didn't raise my glass. My throat was too tight, my body trembling from holding back tears. But somewhere deep inside, beneath the shame, beneath the sting, something hardened. I sat there quietly, watching their smug smiles, their careless laughter, their celebration at my expense. And in that silence, I promised myself, tomorrow will not look like today. They didn't know who I really was. They didn't know the man waiting for me outside that hall. They didn't know the truth I had carried silently, protecting it like a flame. And tomorrow, when the Rolls-Royce pulled up in front of them, every single one of them would stand. I walked out of the banquet hall with my head high, but inside, my chest felt like it was caving in. The humiliation still echoed in my ears, my mother's words, my family's laughter. Every step to the parking lot felt heavy. But then I saw Ethan. He was leaning against his SUV, waiting for me like he always did. Calm, steady, safe. The second his eyes met mine, he knew. Without a word, he opened his arms, and I let myself sink into him. "She did it again," I whispered. Ethan's jaw tightened. "You don't deserve that." "I'm tired of being their target," I said, pulling back. "I'm done staying quiet." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "So tomorrow we stop being quiet." I hesitated. Tomorrow's brunch will be worse. She's inviting people who matter to her. Ethan's voice was steady, almost protective. Then let's show them who you are. If it takes pulling up in the rolls to make them listen, then that's what we'll do. A fire sparked inside me, not revenge, not pride, just the need to stand tall for once in front of the people who had spent years cutting me down. All right, I said softly. Tomorrow, we go true. The morning of the brunch arrived colder than I expected. A sharp wind pressed against the windows, carrying the kind of gray sky that promised an unsettled day. I stood in front of the mirror, palms pressed against the dresser, staring at my reflection. My face looked calm, but my stomach churned. Today wasn't about outfits or appearances. It was about showing up as someone they could no longer erase. Still, I chose carefully. A navy dress that hugged my frame without screaming for attention, a camel coat draped across my shoulders, and black heels that gave me height without stealing comfort. I wanted them to see me, not a costume, not an exaggeration, just me. Ethan arrived right on time. The knock on the door was firm, steady, just like him. When I opened it, he was there in a tailored charcoal suit, hair neatly combed, expression serious but soft when he looked at me. In his hand, he held a travel mug. "Oat milk, 2 sugars," he said, pressing it into my hands. My lips tugged into a faint smile. "You remembered?" "I always do." For a moment, we just stood there, letting silence breathe between us. Then he asked, "Ready?" I exhaled slowly. "As I'll ever be." The elevator ride down felt longer than usual, like the universe was stretching time just to test me. By the time the doors opened to the lobby, my heartbeat was thundering. Outside, parked at the curb, the Rolls-Royce shimmered under the dull sky like a secret the world hadn't earned yet. It didn't scream wealth, it radiated presence. Neighbors stopped mid-stride, some pretending not to stare, others openly gawking. I slipped into the back seat, the leather hugging me in quiet reassurance. When Ethan started the engine, the hum was low and steady, like a heartbeat too calm to be nervous. The drive felt surreal. Buildings blurred past, streetlights flickered, and my phone buzzed endlessly in my purse. I refused to look. I already knew what the messages said: warnings, mockery, reminders to stay in my place. I powered the phone off and pushed it aside. "You don't need them to define you," Ethan said, eyes fixed on the road. "I know," I murmured, "but I need to stop letting them silence me." When we turned onto Maple Ridge, my breath caught. The reunion house loomed ahead, a sprawling stone monument to appearances. The driveway was packed with cars. SUVs lined up like trophies, sedans polished to impress, even a couple of shiny imports parked right up front. But when we pulled in, the purr of the Rolls made heads turn instantly. From the wide bay windows, faces appeared, pressing closer to the glass. A ripple spread across the room, like someone had dropped a stone into a still pond. I opened the door slowly, the wind tugging at my coat. My heels clicked against the pavement, each step echoing louder than it should have. Ethan rounded the car and joined me, keeping a respectful half step behind, his presence like a shield. Through the window, I saw them. My mother frozen mid-conversation, her smile faltering. My sister Lila's glass tilted in her hand as she gawked. Aunts, uncles, cousins, they all turned, whispers sparking across the room. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I wasn't here to beg for a seat. I wasn't here to prove anything. I was here to take back the voice they'd tried so hard to strip away. I turned to Ethan, my voice low but steady. "No rescuing me." He gave me the faintest smile. "I wouldn't dare." Together, we walked toward the front steps, and inside, my entire family waited, about to learn a truth that would silence the room in a way no toast ever could. The doors opened with a creak that shouldn't have been loud, but in the silence that followed our arrival, it sounded like a crack through the air. Conversations had halted, laughter dissolved mid-breath, and the only thing filling the room was the sharp clink of a spoon dropped against porcelain. I stepped inside first, the warmth of the house brushing against my skin, but it didn't soften me. Eyes followed every step I took. Aunts shifted uncomfortably. Cousins whispered to their spouses, and my sister Lila leaned back in her chair with a smirk that was meant to mask her shock, but didn't quite manage it. And then there was my mother. She stood near the fireplace, a champagne glass poised in her hand, but her knuckles had whitened around the stem. Her eyes, always sharp, always searching for weakness, met mine. For a fleeting second, I thought I saw something I had never seen before. Hesitation. Ava, she said, her voice pitched higher than usual. You decided to come after all. I slipped out of my coat and draped it neatly over the arm of a chair, moving with deliberate calm. Of course I came. You invited the family, didn't you? Her lips tightened. Yes, but... Her gaze flicked toward Ethan, who had followed me in, steady and silent, the very picture of composure in his tailored suit. She blinked, then glanced back at me. I wasn't expecting... company, Lila snorted, swirling the wine in her glass. She always needs someone to hold her hand. I turned my head toward her slowly, locking eyes with the sister who had never missed a chance to cut me down. No, Lila, I don't need anyone to hold my hand, but I do choose who stands beside me. There's a difference. A hush swept over the room, broken only by the faint crackle of the fireplace. My Uncle Scott cleared his throat, his attempt at levity sounding forced. Well, Ava, you've made an entrance. That car outside. Rolls-Royce, isn't it? His wife elbowed him, whispering, Scott! But he grinned wider, smug as always. Yes, it is, Ethan answered before I could. His tone was calm, almost casual, but the room reacted like someone had dropped a bomb. Several cousins shifted uncomfortably in their seats, a few raising eyebrows. My mother's eyes narrowed, flickering between us. Why would you be driving that? Her words came carefully, each one clipped like she was trying not to choke on them. Ethan glanced at me, giving me the chance to decide whether we said it outright. But I held the silence. I wanted them to lean forward, to feel the weight of their own curiosity pressing on them like a stone. Rachel, my cousin, broke first. Wait, she said, eyes darting. Are you saying, what, he owns that? Owns it? Scott laughed, shaking his head. Don't be ridiculous. People lease things all the time. Appearances are easy. He looked at me, smug satisfaction on his face. Isn't that right, Ava? Appearances are all you've ever... Had the words should have cut deep, the way they always had before. But today they bounced off me. For the first time, I realized how small his opinion truly was. I stepped closer to the table, my voice calm but loud enough for every ear in the room. For years, you've all defined me by what you think I lack. No job you approved of, no lifestyle that impressed you, no worth in your eyes. And I stayed quiet. I let you tell your story about me while I disappeared into the background. I paused, my gaze sweeping across every familiar face, the smirks, the judgment, the pity, all of it. My voice steadied, stronger now. But here's the truth. I don't need your approval. I never did. And I am not the invisible girl you decided I was. The silence that followed was so deep, I could hear the faint tick of the clock on the mantel. Lila leaned forward, her eyes narrowing, her smirk faltering. You think showing up in some fancy car changes everything? No, I said firmly. I think living my life with dignity changes everything. The car is just what made you look up long enough to notice me. Gasps rippled across the room. My aunt shifted uncomfortably. Scott opened his mouth but shut it again, words failing him for once. And my mother, her face was stone. But I saw the crack in her expression, the disbelief she couldn't quite hide. Enough, she said suddenly, her voice rising. This isn't the place for speeches. You're embarrassing yourself. I took a step toward her, the weight of the entire room behind me. No, Mother. I embarrassed myself for years by staying quiet. Today, I'm simply telling the truth. The room froze. Chairs creaked as people shifted, unsure of where to look, what to say, how to process the shift in power that had just happened. Behind me, Ethan placed a steady hand on the back of my chair, not guiding me, not shielding me, simply standing with me. His quiet presence said more than any words could. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the girl they mocked or ignored. I was the one they had to face. And tomorrow, none of them would ever forget it. The silence after my words wasn't ordinary silence. It was heavy, thick enough to suffocate the room. For the first time in years, their eyes weren't dismissing me, weren't laughing at me. They were searching, calculating, wondering what they had missed. My mother's glass trembled slightly in her hand. She set it down with care, but the sound of the crystal tapping against the marble counter was louder than anything else. You think, she said slowly, her voice coated in venom, that walking in here with a man and a car makes you someone? No, I said clearly. I think the years I spent building my life, while you pretended I had nothing, make me someone. The words landed hard. A cousin at the far end coughed awkwardly. An aunt shifted her chair. Lila crossed her arms, smirk twitching into something uglier. You're bluffing, she said. You always wanted us to think you were doing better than you were. You used to borrow money from me for gas, Ava. Don't act like you've turned into something overnight. I turned to her, and for the first time, I didn't feel heat rush to my cheeks or shame crawl into my chest. Instead, I felt steady. You're right, Lila, I said softly. I did borrow money for gas once. I struggled. I failed. I started from nothing. But do you know what makes me different from you? Her smirk faltered. What? I didn't stay small. Gasps spread across the table like a current of electricity. Ethan finally spoke, his voice low, even, but carrying across the stunned air. You're looking at someone who's built more resilience than any of you could ever measure. She didn't just survive. You underestimated her. That's your mistake. My Uncle Scott leaned forward, scowling. What exactly are you saying here? What kind of game is this? Who are you? Ethan's eyes didn't leave mine as he answered, his words chosen with precision. Her husband, and a man who's never needed this family's approval. The impact of that statement reverberated through the room. A collective intake of breath swept over my relatives. Someone whispered, husband? As if it were a scandal, as if the word itself shattered their carefully crafted image of me. My mother's eyes widened, her composure cracking for just a moment. Married? She hissed. You got married without telling us? Yes, I said firmly, because I knew what you'd do. You would have mocked, twisted, belittled it, just like everything else I've ever done. So I kept my life separate, away from this poison, away from the noise. The room reeled. My mother's hand hovered in the air like she wanted to reach for something, anything to steady herself. Lila's smirk had evaporated entirely. Her face was pale, her glass forgotten on the table. Then Ethan stepped slightly forward, his presence filling the silence. For years, you've told Ava she had no future, that she was nothing, that she'd always be the background in her own story. His voice didn't rise, but it had weight, measured, undeniable. But here's the truth. Ava is the strongest person in this room. She is the reason I'm standing where I am today. She is my partner, my equal, and the woman who has built a life alongside me that none of you even realize exists. I swallowed, my throat thick with emotion. The words I had wanted to hear my whole life, acknowledgement, recognition, love spoken openly, were now said in the very room where I had once been silenced. My mother tried one last time, her voice sharp but strained. So what? You think because he has money, because he drives that car, that you've suddenly elevated yourself? That makes you proud? No, I said, stepping closer to her, my voice steady but burning. What makes me proud is that despite all the years you told me I was nothing, despite all the times you excluded me, mocked me, humiliated me, I built a life worth living, a life you can't touch, can't control, and can't define. My words echoed, and this time, no one laughed. No one dared. Ethan reached for my hand, not to shield me, but to stand with me. Together, we turned toward the door. The room was frozen. Cousins speechless, aunts stunned, my sister shaking with silent anger, my mother gripping the table like it was the only thing holding her upright. As we walked out, heels clicking on marble, the only sound behind us was the scraping of chairs. One by one, they all stood, not out of respect, not out of choice, but because for the first time, they had to. The Rolls-Royce door closed with a soft thud, shutting them out. As the car pulled away, the house grew smaller in the rear window, a monument to years of silence I no longer owed them. I leaned back against the seat, my hand still in Ethan's. My voice was quiet but certain. They'll never look at me the same again. Ethan squeezed my hand, his lips curving into the faintest smile. Good, because you were never who they thought you were. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. For the first time in my life, I felt free.